So I think we're going to move to the next section, and that is questions from the community.
Okay.
So we put out on social media that we were interviewing you, and people from the local community are asking questions. Jack Newman has asked, what are your hopes for the new council, which is going to be coming up next year?
As a community, let's be positive. And it's not, the council's the council, but it's our responsibility to the community. If we keep a sport that's called council bashing, it's really hard to move forward as a society. We're going to have 15 councillors the first time round, which may get knocked back to 8 or 9 with Rick Hart's referendum about the number of councillors. I actually disagree that we should have a lesser number of councillors. I represent a quarter of the coast, or the coast has got 4.5 state MPs, and each of us has got 3 full-time staff. A councillor gets paid $30,000 a year and has got no staff and represent the same geographic area as I do. So I just think we have to be very careful making these councillors represent more area with less resources. I believe we've got a huge opportunity of the coast moving forward. Obviously the amalgamation of the councils was a dismal failure, an absolute failure, and not ideal, and that was what was recommended leading in. I feel really sorry for the councillors who were not given the information they needed to run the council, I believe, but I think Rick Hart's steadied the ship. Admittedly, we've had the sale of a lot of our community resources. I think David Farmer's really steadied the internal ship. So with their leadership and David Farmer's leadership, I'm confident that we've got the capacity to have a hugely changed council and bring it on, I say. And I really look forward to working with our new councillors with the experience that we've had as well. I think coming on the journey, I've done so much council work that wasn't part of my job description. I've learned more about local government than I ever wanted to learn, but absolutely bring it on.
So one thing which I hear all through the community, and it's everywhere you go, is people want their councillors back. Yeah, it has been something which they've really missed and not enjoyed not having their councillors. But most people probably wouldn't know that there is a referendum on moving from 15 to 9 and moving from potentially 5 wards to 3 wards. I think the biggest issue with that is the main population at the moment is on the southern end of the coast. And while it's probably unbalanced at the moment, that there is over-representation in the north is where the future is of the Central Coast. That's where all the building is going. And if we move to 9, I feel that the north may lose its voice. And it's a big issue, I think. I just don't think it's a wise decision. I think that's a community conversation that we've got to have as it gets closer to that election. And it's also an interesting from a state perspective. People say we want new basketball stadiums down this end. Hey, we've got, as you said, that growth of the population in the north. We definitely need to think about making sure we deliver the infrastructure and the resources so that huge population is active and interactive and has that sense of community that we enjoy down this end of the coast. In your view, what is a councillor's role?
It's a tough one. It's a really tough one, and I think the community get caught up in local DAs and that they have to fix their curb and guttering out the front. It's a strategic oversight. It's a tough thing for the community to understand, but it really is about the future of the coast. The operations, which is the fixing of the curb and gutterings and the tarring of the roads, lays in the hands of the people within the council. We've got the staff within the council buildings. The councillors obviously have got some input into that, but they don't control. There's not enough money to do everybody's curb and guttering. And if councillors have to go out and fight the planning department about every single DA, that's not the job of someone who's earning $30,000 a year that have got to sit and go through business papers about communities and parks and activities and what we're going to do on Australia Day and what we're doing up on the mountains and the catchment areas, etc., etc. I think that the level of operation needs to be kept at that big area there. What we can do with the New South Wales government about the health of our community to invigorate the lives for seniors so they can stay and be connected in their communities. I really love and like to see the councillors committed at staying at that strategic thinking level rather than the tedious nitty-gritty of the pothole out the front. But unfortunately, the mindset, I think, is a lot the pothole out the front.
So, Jack, I hope we answered your question there. So the next question's from Johnny Rowe. Firstly, he said, legend. Yeah.
Thanks, Johnny.
But he asked, what's your view on the recommendation from the Royal Commission that we should be phasing out specialty schools and including people in
it's
the mainstream.
It was not necessarily, it was a recommendation of part of the Royal Commission and a non-recommendation by part of the Royal Commission. Same as phasing out of old terms sheltered workshops, specialised employment for people with disabilities, which is a conversation I'm having about full integration. I believe there's a space for schools for kids with really complex needs, that in the mainstream their needs would be very differently met. And also with the mainstream kids, I think we've got work to do. One of the recommendations was putting all new schools, all disability sections included in mainstream campuses. Great idea, and the crossover there. But I think there's still an education space for separate education, because the needs of the kids from Gosford High School are very different to the needs of the kids from Glenvale High School, and don't necessarily sit together perfectly side by side in the same classroom. On the same campus, absolutely. With some degree of crossover, absolutely.
So most people on the Central Coast probably don't know what the specialty schools are and the public schools which have specialty units. Can you maybe name some of them?
It's a celebration. It's a celebration of normality, I think. And hey, lots of families have got kids with special needs or someone with a disability in their family. But what happened 40 years ago is that those kids went to a special school, and we've still got a school, a Glenvale school. Glenvale's got a campus at Gosford, and I've also got a campus up at the entrance where kids with very high needs are taught by teachers with incredibly talented teachers with skills that's specific for those kids. But as well as that, we've got inclusion, we've got support units in lots of our schools across the coast. One of the crackers is at Henry Kendall High School. It's right in the middle of the school, and the kids at Henry Kendall know who the support kids are. The support kids are included in parts of the campus, and then they've got their own education area within that campus. Same thing at Brisbane Water Secondary College, where I taught as well. East Gosford Public School's got a fantastic support unit. So those kids are completely in tune with kids with disabilities and their needs and their frustrations as well, which I think further down the track, Canada had inclusion in their schools earlier than Australia did. Canada's now sitting on, I think, 15% employment of people with disabilities. So the schools are a foundation and a building block. So investing in our schools is super important for all levels of our society moving forward, as far as I'm concerned.
So the next question is from Jolie, and she's mentioned that you're the regional champion for parliamentarians with disabilities.
Yes.
That is a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. Yeah,
but what's that mean?
So it's really interesting. As a parliamentarian, there's very little professional development. I was a teacher, all of a sudden I'm a member of Parliament, holy macaroni. And so we've got something called the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, which is around the world supporting parliamentarians. So we've also within that, so they identify problems in parliaments and support structures to support parliamentarians and training courses, etc., etc. So 25 years ago, they set up Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians about getting more people with more women into Parliament, and that's been pretty successful to varying levels in various countries. So when I first came into Parliament, I was part of the inaugural Commonwealth Parliamentarians with Disabilities, about getting more people with disabilities into parliaments across the Commonwealth. And now we've developed a role, and I'm a regional champion for making sure our parliaments are accessible. So when I get there, I'm still having meetings. Like even yesterday, I had another meeting about getting ramps and access within my own workplace. That shouldn't be the case. The reasonable adjustment thing 5 years down the track. But let's work to make our parliaments inclusive as they possibly can, which means that not only the employees with disabilities, the public have got a better aspect of accessibility. So I'm now checking out parliaments around Australia, but also interacting with parliamentarians around the world about their parliaments and how we can make them more accessible because of my experience. So that's a bit of a privilege, but it's sort of prior to this, when I was also a teacher, I set up an international aid and development organisation called Sport Matters, which is about social change and community change. So this is like combining the old world and the new world. And so especially across the Pacific, as we move towards 2032, the Olympics and Paralympics in Brisbane, I think there's a place to educate the Pacific parliamentarians about people with disabilities, so much so that we might even get people with disabilities thinking about those roles. And there's also a really important thing, it's important to have role models with disabilities as well when there's not people there. And even I went over to the Commonwealth Parliament conference in Ghana, and I went to visit a rehab facility, and there's a fantastic guy who was deaf who'd just finished his degree. And so I said to him, have you ever thought about getting into Parliament? And his face just lit up. Like, it's just, for some people in some countries, it hasn't even been a conversation, but they're doing all this amazing leadership work. Why wouldn't people with disabilities be in Parliament?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.